Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring the work of Eric J. Moore. Now, Moore's an author who makes some pretty extraordinary claims.
Extraordinary.
Yeah. For instance, he claims to have captured an image of God's glory on the covers of his book.
Wow. That's quite a statement. I mean, an image of God's glory, that's...
Yeah, I know. It's a bold claim, right?
Definitely.
And before we even get to that image, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about Moore himself.
Yeah.
You know, I know you're fascinated by people who kind of blend personal experience with these grand narratives, and Moore definitely fits the bill.
He does indeed.
He grew up in Compton, California, which he describes as both the kingdom of heaven and hell.
That's quite the description.
I know, right?
What a powerful way to describe a place.
Yeah, to hold those two contrasting ideas in a single location.
Right.
You know, it suggests this real complexity of perspective.
Yeah, it's like he's saying that even in the midst of hardship, there's this glimmer of something transcendent.
Exactly. And this idea of contrasting forces seems to run through a lot of his work.
It does.
Now, Moore doesn't just tell his personal story.
Right?
He connects it to this much larger narrative.
Yeah.
One that's rooted in biblical prophecy and historical events.
Yeah, he sees his own life as intertwined with the unfolding of a new era, what he calls Acts 2.
Now, for those of us who maybe aren't Bible scholars, can you break down what he means by Acts 2?
Sure. In the Bible, Acts 2 is the chapter that describes the descent of the Holy Spirit and the beginning of the Christian church.
Okay.
Moore seems to be suggesting that we're on the cusp of a similar spiritual awakening, a second coming of Jesus marked by divine signs, and a profound societal shift.
So he's not just talking about a historical event from the Bible. He's saying it's happening now in our time.
That's his claim.
Wow.
He sees signs of this Acts 2 era all around us, including specific celestial events like the 4 blood moons that appeared on Jewish feast days a few years back.
You mentioned in your notes that you'd always been curious about blood moon prophecies.
I have.
How does Moore connect those to this whole Acts 2 idea?
He sees them as divine signs, warnings of impending judgment, and a call to spiritual renewal.
Okay.
He even cites a specific verse from the Jubilee Bible 2000 that talks about the sun turning to darkness and the moon to blood before the day of the Lord.
It sounds like he's weaving together biblical passages, historical events, and even personal experiences into this grand narrative of spiritual transformation.
He's creating this tapestry of meaning that points towards Acts 2.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
He claims that he captured an image of God's glory during those blood moon eclipses, and that image now appears on the covers of his book. He sees it as a sign of the Son of Man, a visual manifestation of Jesus Christ.
Oh, wow.
So wait, he's saying that he photographed these eclipses and the resulting images aren't just beautiful, they're divinely ordained.
That's his claim, and it's a bold one. He believes these images aren't just random occurrences. They're messages from a higher power confirming the truth of the Bible and pointing toward the reality of Acts 2.
Okay, so let me get this straight. This guy grew up in Compton, had a spiritual awakening, believes we're in the midst of a second coming of Jesus, and claims to have captured an image of God's glory on his book covers. This is a lot to unpack.
It is a lot. To understand his claims, we need to delve into his personal journey. He talks a lot about his military service, including time spent in Diego Garcia during a period of heightened global tension.
Oh, right.
I wonder if being stationed in such a strategically important location during that time played a role in shaping his worldview.
That's a good point. Diego Garcia was a major U.S. military base, especially after the Iran hostage crisis. It must have felt like being at the center of global events.
Right. And Moore talks about witnessing a buildup of military power that left a lasting impact on him. He even connects it to his later spiritual awakening, seeing it as a sign of the world teetering on the brink of chaos.
So it's not just personal struggles that informed his worldview, but these larger global events that he sees as evidence of a world in need of spiritual transformation.
Precisely. He's weaving together personal experiences, global events, and biblical prophecy to create this tapestry of meaning that points toward Acts 2.
This raises a question for me. If he sees all these signs pointing toward a second coming of Jesus and a massive spiritual awakening, why does he focus so much on the year 2016? What makes that year so significant in his view?
Well, as you recall, that's the year of the 4 blood moons. He also seems to view the election of Donald Trump that year as a significant event, though not necessarily in a positive light. He's quite critical of both political parties, seeing them as corrupted by power and greed.
It sounds like he's not just predicting a spiritual awakening, but also a major societal upheaval.
Absolutely. And this is where his concept of Jubilee comes into play.
Okay, you mentioned that Jubilee is a key theme in Moore's work and one that you're particularly interested in exploring. Can you elaborate on what he means by that?
Sure. In the Bible, Jubilee is described as a time of release, forgiveness of debts, and societal reset. It's like hitting the reset button on centuries of injustice and inequality.
Wow. So he's connecting Acts 2 to this ancient concept of Jubilee, suggesting that we're on the verge of a massive societal transformation.
That's right. He sees it as a time to release old paradigms, forgive past transgressions, and rebuild society on a foundation of spiritual principles.
And those spiritual principles seem to be at the heart of his message.
Idea.
He keeps mentioning keeping family church as a key element of this Acts 2 era.
Yes, that's a concept we'll definitely need to dive into further. It seems to be about creating a spiritual community within the family, fostering a sense of shared values, and a space for spiritual exploration and growth. He sees this as a crucial building block for a transformed society.
It's almost like he's saying that true spiritual transformation starts at home within the family unit.
That seems to be his point. He's suggesting that strong families grounded in faith are the foundation of a just and equitable society.
It's a compelling idea,
Yeah.
especially in a world that often feels fragmented and disconnected.
Well,
But before we get too far into that, I'm still stuck on this image of God's glory that he claims to have captured.
Yeah.
He photographed these eclipses through a specific archway in a cemetery rite. What's the significance of that location?
That's a question that takes us even deeper into the mystery of Eric J. Moore and his extraordinary claims. You're right to focus on that location. It's not just any cemetery. Moore describes it as a dwelling place of the Lord, specifically choosing a Moorish-style archway for his photographs.
Okay, I'm sensing some layers here. We've got blood moon prophecies, claims of divine images, and now this cemetery with a Moorish archway. What's the connection?
It's all intertwined with his interpretation of history and biblical prophecy. He sees the Moors, a Muslim people who ruled Spain for centuries, as playing a significant role in this larger spiritual narrative. Their expulsion from Spain in 1492, a year marked by a blood moon, is a key event in his timeline.
So he's drawing a line from the expulsion of the Moors in 1492 to these blood moon eclipses in 2016, and he sees his photographs taken through this Moorish archway as part of that same historical and spiritual lineage.
Exactly. It's as if he's saying that these events are not isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern, a divine tapestry woven across centuries.
This is where I have to admit I'm struggling a bit.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I'm captivated by the way he connects these seemingly disparate events, but on the other hand, it feels like a bit of a stretch.
I understand your hesitation. It's a lot to take in, and it certainly challenges conventional thinking. But remember, we're trying to understand his perspective, the internal logic of his worldview.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's not about necessarily agreeing with his interpretations, but trying to grasp how he arrived at them.
Precisely. And to do that, I think we need to delve a bit deeper into his concept of Acts 2. It's not just about celestial events and historical patterns. It's about a fundamental shift in consciousness, a spiritual revolution that will transform society as we know it.
He seems to believe that this transformation is not just inevitable, but imminent. He's not just predicting it, he's calling for it.
Absolutely. And this is where his Jubilee party concept comes into play. He's not content to just wait for this spiritual revolution to happen. He wants to actively participate in it to create a political movement that will usher in this new era.
His vision for this Jubilee party is pretty radical. He wants to break free from the traditional left-right political paradigm and create something entirely new, something grounded in biblical principles of forgiveness, compassion, and shared prosperity.
He's essentially saying that our current political systems are incapable of addressing the root causes of our societal problems. He believes we need a complete overhaul, a return to spiritual values as the foundation for a just and equitable society.
It's a bold vision, and one that will likely be met with skepticism from both sides of the political spectrum.
No doubt. He's not afraid to challenge the status quo, and his message is likely to resonate most strongly with those who feel disillusioned by the current state of affairs.
He's also quite critical of organized religion, isn't he? He sees it as having lost its way, becoming too focused on dogma and hierarchy and not enough on genuine spiritual connection.
That's a critique that's been voiced by many, both inside and outside religious circles. Moore seems to be advocating for a more personal and experiential form of faith, one that's less about following rules and more about cultivating a direct relationship with the divine.
This brings us back to his concept of keeping family church. It's not just about strengthening family bonds, it's about creating a space for spiritual exploration and growth within the family unit.
Exactly. He sees the family as the foundation of both spiritual and societal transformation. If we can create strong families grounded in faith and love, he believes we can create a better world.
It's a powerful idea.
Yeah.
But I have to wonder, what does he propose we do with all those existing structures, those religious and political institutions that he seems to be rejecting? Does he have a concrete plan for dismantling or reforming them?
That's a question he doesn't fully answer. He's more focused on outlining the principles of this new era, this Acts 2 reality, than on providing a step-by-step guide for achieving it.
So it's more of a vision statement than a policy platform?
I think that's a fair assessment. He's casting a vision for a different way of being in the world, a way of relating to each other and to the sacred that transcends the limitations of our current systems.
It's certainly a vision that invites further exploration. We've covered a lot of ground here, from his personal experiences to his grand narratives of spiritual transformation. But we haven't yet addressed the elephant in the room, these images on his book covers that he claims are divinely ordained.
That's right. We've danced around it exploring the context of his claims, but now it's time to face them head on. How do we approach this aspect of his work without getting lost in debates about the nature of proof or the existence of God?
That's the million-dollar question. And I think the answer lies in remembering that we're dealing with a personal narrative here. Moore is sharing his experiences and beliefs, not presenting a scientific treatise.
I agree. We can approach his claims with respect and curiosity without necessarily accepting them as objective truth. It's about understanding the meaning he derives from these images, the role they play in his personal journey.
So it's not about proving or disproving the divine origin of these images, but understanding their significance within his worldview.
Exactly. He believes these images are a visual manifestation of God's glory, a sign of the Son of Man, confirming the truth of the Bible and pointing towards the reality of Acts 2. But what do those images actually depict? What do they look like? And how does he connect them to his broader message?
Those are questions that lead us to the heart of this mystery. And to answer them, we need to take a closer look at those book covers to see for ourselves what Moore claims to have captured.
Yeah, I've got the book covers pulled up here on my screen.
Okay.
And I have to say, they're pretty striking.
You mentioned you had a background in photography. Do you see anything particularly unique about the composition or the way the light is captured?
Well, from a technical standpoint, they're well-executed photographs. I mean, he's clearly got a good eye for composition and using light to create a sense of drama.
All right.
But what's interesting is not so much the technical skill, but the way he imbues these images with meaning.
What do you mean?
Well, he's not just presenting them as beautiful pictures of a celestial event. He's saying that these images, taken through that specific archway in that specific cemetery, reveal a divine message.
So for him, it's the context that elevates these pictures to something more than just photographs.
Right.
The location, the timing, his intention, it all comes together to create what he believes is a sign from God.
Exactly. He describes seeing faces and figures in the interplay of light and shadow during those eclipses. Figures he believes represent biblical prophets and even Jesus himself.
So he's literally seeing the divine in these images.
That's his claim. And he connects those images to his concept of Acts 2, saying that they're not just a confirmation of biblical prophecy, but a glimpse into the spiritual reality that's unfolding in our time.
It's almost like he's saying that the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds is thinning, and these images are evidence of that.
That's a good way to put it. He sees himself as a witness to this unfolding spiritual drama, and these photographs are his way of sharing that vision with the world.
You know, it's interesting, even if you don't share his specific beliefs, there's a certain power to the way he blends personal experience, biblical interpretation, and visual imagery to create this compelling narrative.
I agree. It's not just what he's saying, but how he's saying it that makes his work so intriguing.
Yeah.
He's weaving together these different threads to create a tapestry that's both deeply personal and universally resonant.
There's a certain sincerity to his voice, a conviction that comes through in his writing. Whether you agree with him or not, you can't help but be drawn into his world.
And that's what makes exploring his work so rewarding. It challenges us to think differently, to consider perspectives that we might not normally encounter.
So where does this leave us? We've explored Moore's life, his concept of Acts 2, his vision for a Jubilee party, and his claim to have captured divine images. What's the takeaway for you? And what might our listener take away from this deep dive?
Well, for me, the takeaway is that there's always more to discover more, to learn more, to question more. Moore's story is a reminder that even the most familiar narratives can be reinterpreted in ways that challenge our assumptions and expand our understanding of the world.
It's also a reminder that personal experiences, however unconventional they may be, can offer valuable insights into the human condition. Moore's journey, with all its twists and turns, speaks to the enduring power of the human spirit to seek meaning and connection in a complex world.
And perhaps it's a challenge to each of us to look more closely at the world around us, to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, and to consider the possibility that there might be more to reality than meets the eye.
That's a beautiful thought to leave our listeners with. And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to explore Eric J. Moore's work for yourself. You might just discover a new way of seeing the world, a new way of understanding your place in it. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.